All right, everybody. So we'll go ahead and get started now. As more people hop on, that's fine. Everybody is muted, just so you're aware, so we cannot hear anybody who's speaking. But if you'd like to share your company name, where you're from, where you're tuning in from, we would be happy to give you a shout out. As questions come up, feel free to type them into the Q&A box, and we will respond to them at the end of the webinar. I'd like to start off by expressing Invennt solidarity with everyone through this pandemic that we're all facing. These are certainly uncertain times, and our hope is that your families, friends, and colleagues are all in good health, that you're able to keep your spirits up throughout this, and irrespective of which time we're going to go ahead and get started. For those of you who don't know Invennt already, we are a specialist management consulting company. We work exclusively with construction, engineering, architect companies, and we're really excited to share this new executive briefing that we have with you today. I'm Sarah. I'm a communications consultant here at Invennt, and I'm going to be your host for the webinar. And today we have Brendan Morahan and Tim Fitch joining me from Invennt to go over our findings from executive briefing, our response to community innovation survey. So in this briefing, we're going to compare our own research with the UK Community Innovation Survey that was recently published in March by the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. In their survey, they show a significant reduction in innovation within the construction sector, whereas we find that the construction sector is highly innovative. We will be releasing our executive briefing next Friday, and I'm going to share the link in the chat box here now for anyone who's interested in pre-registering for a copy of that. They're able to go click that link and just type in your details, and we'll send you a pre-registration link for free, so you can actually read the briefing when it's released next Friday. And for anybody who's watching the recording of this, the link will be in the description of the video. So just a little bit of housekeeping again, as you're hopping on, there's a Q&A section at the end of the video, so feel free to type in your questions, type in your name, where you're from. We're happy to give a shout out to your company for joining on. And I'm going to be handing that over now to Brendan Morahan. And Brendan, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit? Brendan, sorry, you're muted and I can't unmute you. You've got to click the mute button.
Right, am I on?
Yes, you are.
Thank you everyone for bearing with me. Sorry about that. And maybe as a consequence of what I'm just about to say, that it's struck me that I'm now entering the sixth decade in the construction sector, having started in 1979. So since then, I've worked in global contracting for 30 years and consulting for 11 years. So as you can imagine, I've experienced a lot in that period, a lot good, some not so good. But my abiding memories of the industry are really about those people who through their ingenuity have overcome significant challenges and created great results enjoyed by societies in general. And I've got to say that in my early years, I really respected and frankly admired what I would call the humble, matter-of-fact way we just did this and moved on to the next challenge. There wasn't much bragging or boasting about it, it's just what we did. But as my career developed, that respect and admiration started to turn to frustration, really, because the great things we were doing as an industry were not really being properly recognised and celebrated internally, and consequently were not appreciated by those outside the sector. So when we started Invennt, we were very clear about our mission, which is to create value through construction so that construction is viewed as a key sector, one to invest in, one to develop a career in. So the key message I would like to impress over the next 5 or 10 minutes or so is the importance of each business thinking both tactically and strategically about innovation. I see very few businesses in this sector who do neither, but frankly too few who do both in a systematic way. And I contest that if you do, the rewards will be significant, not just financially. So if I start with the UK Innovation Survey, the headline findings of which were issued by the department on 26th of March 2020, and the full report is due to be released this summer. What I'd like to do very quickly is just define how the report views innovation, because I think, as we'll see later, definitions are very important. It refers to 4 criteria. I just want to refer to the first 3 for reasons that will become clear to you. The first one So innovation is one of the following: the introduction of a new or significantly improved product, good or service or process. 2, engagement in innovation projects not yet complete, scaled back or abandoned. And 3, new and significantly improved forms of organisation, business structures or practices, and marketing concepts or strategies. Now, as I say, there is a fourth one, but I won't refer to that one specifically at the moment for the following reason. That those first 3 activities are what the department refer to as businesses that are termed to be innovation active. So if you're doing one or more of those in this survey, you're considered to be innovation active. Now, of those construction related businesses surveyed, 70% stated they were not innovation active in the period 2016 to 2018. And this was an increase from 54% in the previous period. So according to this report, as a sector, we're actually getting worse. Now, the report itself acknowledges that businesses reporting innovative activities do not think of themselves as innovators, maybe for some of the reasons I referred to earlier. Themes from the comments received within the report also make clear that where government grants and tax credits are provided, they're key factors in the decision to invest in innovation. And one interesting point that I'll touch on a little bit later is that the report also highlights that the most important source of information for innovation was internal sources, actually resides within the organisation itself. So you can imagine that this report made for disappointing reading for us, but also raised some serious concerns as well. Because we have conducted a lot of research, and maybe I've asked you to move on over the years, and there are 2 studies in particular I want to reference. In our Mind the Gap report, we note that despite as a sector contributing more than 7% to GDP, we recover less than 3% of the total R&D tax credits granted. Now, when we analysed this, we found some obvious and some less obvious insights. The obvious was that a number of organisations just weren't aware of the scheme. Those that were aware of the scheme, some of them just weren't aware of their entitlement under the scheme, probably going back to some of the issues I referred to earlier. But equally, even those that were aware of the scheme were aware of their entitlement. They were aware in principle only and not really aware of the full scope of that they did that qualified under the scheme. In our Industry 4.0 white paper, only 16% of respondents stated that they did not consider themselves to be innovative. You know, that in comparison with the 70% in the UKIS survey. So from our research, we were aware of the opportunity for the sector to improve, but the UKIS report has suggested there was even further to go. But why the difference? Why is there such a difference between these studies? Well, we'd be interested to get your views on this, but we would speculate there are a number of different reasons. One, I suspect, is about terminology and definition. Innovation, research and development, we certainly find that those terms are used inconsistently, and different organisations, different individuals attribute different meanings to those. Another reason could be perception. As I mentioned earlier, people don't believe that solving problems is innovative. Creating something new is innovative. So is there a perception within the industry that we are competent problem solvers rather than creative solution providers? Another reason might be the role profiles and reward structures in our sector. Do they just reflect us just doing the job as opposed to really recognising the value that each of us individually and collectively bring? It may also be who is actually asking the question. We'd like to think that we're noted as an organisation for being innovative and creative in our approach. So does this elicit a more considered and more positive response? To be debated. But the key issue is that whether it's innovation, problem solving, research and development. It's all looking to find a better way to improve our business, and thus contribute positively to the economy, the society, and the environment. So this report comparison, as well as our own knowledge over, as I referred to earlier, many decades, shows a clear lack of consistency and understanding of the real contribution we make as a sector. So what? Does this actually matter? Well, I would contest emphatically yes. Success in business is about not only recognizing the value each business brings, but it's then, having recognized that, channeling all that effort into constantly finding better ways. Individuals and businesses that do will differentiate themselves, will provide superior returns through enhanced productivity, and will have access to the R&D tax credits that are made available through governments. So maybe now I could hand over to Tim. Tim, maybe you could take us through a little bit more detail as to how we can actually improve cash flow through the initiatives that we've been looking at from this sense of innovation.
Yeah, well, thanks, Brendan, and good morning to everybody. I'll just give you a little bit, for those that don't know me, I'll just give you a little bit of a background on my career. Similar but different from Brendan's. I am afraid I didn't join the industry to the 80s, so I have 1 decade less involvement, albeit it was the 70s, where we aren't both in the industry. So I'm an engineer, and I took a very different route for the early part of my career from Brendan. I was a specialist engineer in geotechnics. I did foundations and slope stability stuff, worked for a subcontractor, quite a well-known one, and then really moved into general business management, and my true strengths began to show themselves in business development and marketing and things like that. And I eventually ended up working for a major contractor doing business development in the rail sector. And when they got bought out by Vinci, I then became the business development director for their infrastructure business. And then 9 years ago, teamed up with Brendan, and since then I've been in consulting. So that's a very potted history of me. And before I get into the meat and potatoes and what I'm going to talk about, there's 2 or 3 people who've asked for a shout out. So good morning, Eugene. Thanks for joining us from O'Neill and Brennan. Who else we got? Damien from Crofton Interiors, you're very welcome. And Gerard Rochford for Rochford Construction. Hi, hope you enjoy the information that we're going to put across in the next 10, or I'm going to put across in 10 minutes. Hope you've enjoyed what Brendan's done. So how can we improve cash flow through innovation? So in a way, it can be a bit of an obvious question that if you innovate some of those things that Brendan spoke about, there's usually an intent to improve productivity, reduce waste, improve the carbon footprint, so on and so forth, improve processes internally, externally, those sorts of things. So the intent is usually to reduce costs. Maybe by improving the processes, it could actually improve cash flow, depending on where you're innovating in your business structure. However, how does this work in the construction sector? So let me just start with some barriers that have been highlighted in that report that Brendan mentioned, the Mind the Gap report that we did last year. We did this in conjunction with the Institution of Civil Engineers, but the conclusions from it, I think, are, although a lot of the data was from civil engineering businesses, frankly, I think it applies equally to builders, architects, consultancies from other work that we've been doing since. So we asked, one of the questions that we asked the cohort of people involved in the questionnaire was, what is stopping innovation? What are the barriers from getting more funding into our innovation from the construction sector. And the senior decision makers highlighted these 4 areas, and you can see they're all fairly high on the response rate: lack of finance or unclear return on investment, absence of strategy or leadership, lack of skills and knowledge, and resistance to change. I don't suppose any of those surprise any of our listeners just now, because that we know our own industry, don't we? So just going on to the next click through, Sarah. So if we take the first one, what's the potential solution to the first barrier, which is the lack of finance or unclear return on investment? Well, of course, you'll have, from the preambles we've had before in this discussion, that research and development in construction isn't well understood, or at least the tax code definition of research and development. This is important because I guess as I said, I'm an engineer, and during my university career and after, I spent plenty of time in laboratories, and I know what a laboratory looks like. It's people with, it's a white room with a bench and stalls in front of it, and people wearing lab coats sat on the bench looking into microscopes with probably a petri dish, and at the end of the bench there's a flask of purple noxious liquid with some unpleasant gas coming out of the top of it. That's what we all think in our mind's eye when we're asked to, well, what does R&D look like? That's what a lot of us think about. And of course, if you're in the biotech industry, if you're looking for a vaccine for COVID-19 or any other drug that's being developed, that is exactly what R&D looks like. But in construction, most of the time it doesn't. And this is a very, very important concept, that the tax code definition is very broad. It's written for all sectors. There's only 1 or 2 sectors which are excluded. I don't suppose anyone's going to shed any tears. I'm afraid lawyers can't claim, but most other sectors can. And as Brendan said, the uptake in construction is well below half what it should be, as viewed as a percentage of GDP. So there's a big pie paid out every year by HMRC. I think the last time I looked, it was about 3.5 billion, and it's only about 2.7% which is claimed by the construction sector, which is way below where I believe it should be. So this issue around research and development it's to do with, as Brendan said, it's partly to do with language. The tax code isn't written in a way that anyone in construction would readily understand it, because it's written in it's written in English, but it's in a very technical, as you might expect, tax code language, and it needs translating for people in this sector. The second thing is, we're all very matter of fact about the great works that we do. I mean, Brendan's passionate about this, but I see it every day in the work that we do with many of our clients, in that you ask people about research and development activity. If I just ask a question like that, most people say, well, we don't do any. We're a construction company, or we're an engineer or an architectural practice. We just don't do it, or tiny bit. But when you ask people about what they're doing day to day, many people will immediately answer solving problems. And that's a clue, because some problems require research and development, not as you think, but as it's defined in the tax code, to solve. And that's where we always start to look. We look at the projects that you're involved with, the difficulties you've been overcoming, whether they be organisational in terms of logistics. It could be to do with heritage issues, it could be to do with sustainability, it could be to do with waste reduction, efficiency improvements, safety issues. It could be any of those things that we're dealing with most days. Often, to solve those problems and move your business forward, move the project forward, you need to do some R&D. It's not going to be all of it, of course it isn't, but something. So that's an important thing to bear in mind, that there is this big opportunity for construction businesses to get some money back via HMRC, but HMRC are implementing a government policy. You are entitled to this money. If you have spent money, whether you realise it or not, on research and development activity, you are entitled to a tax credit. Varies a bit whether you're a large company or a small company, but either way, it's very worthwhile. Very worthwhile. So if anyone's interested in that, just get in contact with me. My email's all over our website. You'll soon find it. So that's the first thing. Get your R&D claimed. What we on the very early part of April, HMRC renewed their commitment to pay out claims within 28 days of submission of the report, or at least 95% of them. And the evidence that we're gathering from our own client base is that they are meeting that commitment. So people whose claims went in at the end of March have had them paid. Those in April that we submitted in April, even some of those have had their claims, and we're only 3 weeks in, literally today. So HMRC are doing their bit to help businesses get over the COVID cash flow crisis. So you're entitled to this. The government wants you to claim it. HMRC are doing their best to process the claims in a timely manner, and our evidence from our own client base is that they are achieving that or close to it. So everyone's doing their bit to get cash into construction to overcome the current problems that we've all got. So that's worth considering. Next click through is the absence of strategy or leadership. So again, this really comes back to our core offering as a consultancy. You know, Brendan's passion is developing strategies for our clients. I quite like doing it as well. The key thing is that if developing strategy, there's a process that we've developed, which we call the business health check. It's a systematic way of looking at your business, and the sort of output from the end of it is almost like a roadmap of what you need to do to get a fully developed strategy, which can use either help you exploit research and development that you're already doing. The research and development cash that you're going to get from HMRC can be used to partly fund it or fully fund it, depending on how much you get and how ambitious your strategy is. And of course, all of this work that we do is data driven. It's not just opinion, it's based on a thorough analysis of your business. But at the end of it, you should be able to be in a much better place to move your business forward. And of course, once you've established this strategy, which is obviously built from a vision, a mission, and some values underneath it, key thing is articulating it to your team. Right, third item, lack of skills and knowledge. Well, I don't know about everyone else during this lockdown period. I know from my own team and partly my own activities that we have, each of us, taken the opportunity to watch more webinars like this, do some online training. And of course, all of that typically, although lots of people are now offering it at a much reduced cost or even free during this period, when we're back to more normal times, of course, that involves typically an investment, certainly in time and maybe money. Again, easily funded through a reasonable R&D tax claim. Third one, please, which is resistance to change. Now, what we found in our work is we've developed a cultural assessment tool for businesses based on what individual teams think. So maybe your senior team or your middle management team or your site teams. Very effective tool for understanding your own culture. And of course, once you understand where your culture is, you might decide that you want to shift it somewhere. as an aid to perhaps having a more positive view of research and development activity as it occurs in construction. So I'm not suggesting you do a cultural assessment to shift your thinking to build a laboratory and buy a load of white coats. You might do, but that isn't really what I mean. It's getting the mindset a little bit more focused on improving the industry and what improvement really means. It's about learning, it's about being open-minded, it's about being systematic in some things and driving towards a conclusion. So I think that covers that slide, Sarah. So I think the other thing that's important for everyone, this is really one of our USPs, is that if you look at our team there, which I'm very proud of, although I did quit, my daughter came in just before we started the broadcast, and I noticed that Alison and Bernadette aren't on that slide, but maybe that would make it a bit lopsided if we had two extra. But you can see we've got a tremendous diverse team, not all of them in the UK. We've got an outpost in Canada, so you can see Stephen and Couture are based in Canada. Everyone else is UK based, and most of them based at our London office. Well, based at home at the moment, of course, but we work in London. We're made up of a bunch of people. You can see there's a massive age range there, but also we've got engineers, commercial people, whether they be on the QS side or procurement, architects. You can see from there we speak a wide range of languages as well. I'm quite good at English, but obviously we've got Arabic, Chinese, and a few people speak French, I think, and German, as well as Welsh. So we're covering many bases there. So you can. This is one of the reasons, particularly on the R&D, but also all the other services we add. We are construction folk. We understand the industry, and therefore, when we're trying to uncover your R&D activity, we know which questions to ask. If you give us a 3-letter acronym, we almost certainly understand it. So the service we offer is very, very efficient of your time and very effective. We close that gap which Brendan mentioned. So when people are claiming either on their own or using maybe their in-house accountant or even one of our competitors who are generalists, what we're finding is that typically we're 42%, we find 42% more qualifying cost. So that's important because who wants to leave that kind of money on the table? So I think I've talked enough. It's now time for some Q&A. So if you want to ask us, I'll hand back now to Sarah because she knows all the protocols.
No worries. Thank you, everybody. So thank you, Tim and Brendan. You did forget, Tim, that we also speak Canadian and Irish.
Sorry, yes. Various dialects of English, so Canadian and Irish English.
So if anybody has any questions, feel free to type them into the Q&A. We'd love to answer questions. Also, if you have some questions that you want to chat with us privately about, we're happy to have you hop over to our website or get in contact with either Tim and Brendan. Their emails are both on the top front page of our website as well too. So there's a personal touch there if you'd like to get in touch with them. We've got one question coming through. So Eugene is asking, where does HMRC draw the line between what is an innovation and what is investment? I would see things like apps, IT development, automation as innovation under R&D. If you bought, say, low emission plant that is purely an investment, or could it be classified as innovation and thus claimable under R&D? Where's the line drawn? We'd like to take that one.
Yeah, I'll take that one, Sarah. So if you have bought a piece of hardware and that's it, you bought it off the shelf, then that's an investment. You haven't actually done any research and development. On the other hand, if you've done a lot of research before choosing that piece of plant, or you've had to develop internal procedures that allow you to use it more effectively or to monitor its performance, and things of that nature, then those activities, or at least part of those activities, would count. So, so you take the example of a low emission, a machine with, say, low emissions. It is interesting because we came across this case doing a piece of research, actually, that there's a very large, excuse me, I've got hiccups. There's a very large infrastructure project in London where they did a piece of research with their contractors and the use of plant, all of which was the most modern and lowest emitting standards, really high quality plant. And I learned something in that I didn't realise that most plant that's supplied nowadays has an automatic cut-off if it's left idle. So if you're in a 360 excavator and you haven't got anything to do, after a few minutes, a bit like a car, it shuts down the engine. And of course, all of this information is recorded back at the manufacturer, at least the engine manufacturer. So I know for a fact that Volvo, who make these wonderful diesel engines, low emission diesel engines, collect all the data from all the plant that they've supplied, and they can therefore monitor it for usage and what the likely CO2 outputs are and all of those sorts of things. And what this piece of research said in this particular case is that although the plant was idle for 50% of the time, it wasn't moving, and therefore you would expect that the CO2 was therefore only being emitted for 50% of the time. In this case, every single driver had overridden, which you can do. There's a button to turn off the automatic shutdown. And here's the crazy thing. When you ask why are you doing that, the answer was, well, if I'm sat in a machine with the engine switched off, I get told off. It's looked upon as being lazy because you're not ready to go to work. So there's a cultural barrier which came out of a piece of work which was looking at CO2 emissions, and they've done everything right. They've got the high quality engines, they got the automatic shutdown, they were recording all of the data, but in this case they weren't achieving what they wanted to, and it was a cultural reason because of the way the operators of those pieces of plant had been indoctrinated over the years, or trained over the years, never to be found with the engine switched off. So I don't know if that helps you, Eugene. So that piece of research, looking at the CO2 emissions across your fleet, is applicable. Actually buying the piece of kit, unless you change it in some way, add your own bit of instrumentation to it or something like that, it wouldn't. Very long-winded answer, but it was a good anecdote.
Thank you for that one. So we've got another question coming through here from Martin Molliker from Evans Molliker Accountants. He says, are there changes that HMRC are proposing to R&D claims that may possibly be duplicated down the supply chain?
There's a consultation on reducing the eligibility, so saying that in essence your qualifying costs can't exceed the total amount of PAYE and NICs that a particular business has paid in a particular year. There's a consultation out for that. It's been delayed because of the virus. So, and what they were seeking to do there is that not us, by the way, but there are, and I don't think there have been some spurious claims where people have, virtually all of the work's been done by subcontractors, and that's an area which HMRC are sensitive to. It's not really just construction; it's across a number of industries. But for most, in fact, all of our clients, it doesn't apply because their claims won't be affected by this ruling. This consultation is only a consultation at present.
Okay, thank you for that one. Richard is asking another question here. We are a construction technology startup. It's an uphill battle with contractors to convince them of the merits of investing in digitization. Any tips to take?
But here's, sorry, yeah, go on, Brendan.
I'll have a go at this one. I think it's, I feel your pain, Richard. I think a couple of comments I would say is, as I'm sure you understand, it is a crowded market out there. Everyone has got the next big thing. Every day we get a lot of inquiries about, can we assist people in getting their product to market? So, you know, it is difficult, but like anything, there are a couple of fundamentals. So forgive me if this seems like I'm teaching you how to suck eggs, but you know, this is an industry that thrives on relationships, and therefore you've got to work hard to make sure that you really develop those relationships at a strategic but also at a personal level. So a lot of it is about the language you're using. Tim referred to the 3-letter acronyms in construction. There's a lot of them, but there's even more in technology. And so there are a lot of conversations that just don't get off the ground because the language being used is not appropriate. Like anything, it's really important that you help those organizations understand why they need that product, because sometimes they don't. You really need to work hard on understanding what the benefits your product brings compared to what they are doing. And one useful way to exploit that is really get to understand what they currently do, because as an industry, we do some great things and we use technology in a great way. If I just think of the office environment, there is some tremendous use of technology. Sometimes the problem, however, is that it's been grown incrementally and it isn't therefore properly integrated. And as a consequence, a lot of time, effort, and therefore waste is going to something that is coming up with an imperfect answer. Now, if you can encourage people to think of that waste as being cost that could be redeployed in an investment sense in a new and a better model that is coming up with a benefit, then I think you're onto something. But as you can imagine from my answer, this is never a quick win. And I think more than ever, if you're new to the industry, obviously I don't know which industry your background is in, if you're new to the industry, more than ever, you've got to use the power of networking to associate yourself with people that do understand the issues from a macro level and get to understand people individually so you can start to understand their specific needs.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Brendan. Actually, as a little bit of a follow-up question here, we've got one from Ala. He says, how can you help construction businesses to digitalize their business models in light of the expected digital transformation due to the corona impact?
Well, I maybe just build on what I've just said. We have been pleasantly surprised as an organisation how technology that existed prior to this situation was not being properly exploited or fully exploited by us as an organisation. This has forced us to exploit it, and it has transformed the way we operate. So much so that we will be a different business coming out of this to the business that we went in, and I think a much better business. So I think it goes back again to some of the core offerings we refer to is understand the purpose of your business and how can that purpose be achieved more effectively than the way you are currently doing it. Technology isn't always the answer, or technology now isn't necessarily the answer. It may be about thinking ahead to identify what technology is needed and then trying to come up with an innovative solution yourself. So we as a business start at the business end of it rather than the technology end of it. There's no shortage of so-called technological solutions out there, but so what if they're not answering your particular need? So we go right back to the beginning of understanding your strategy, understanding how you're attempting to achieve that strategy, where there are gaps or where there are inefficiencies in that technology can assist with, then we look to bolt those in as appropriate.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for that. Okay, so Umer says, another question here, would the cost of permanent employees' time qualify as a qualifying cost for R&D tax credits? If yes, then in theory, anytime we research or develop anything, is that a potential qualifying cost? Who'd like to take that one?
Well, I'll take that one, Sarah.
Okay, go ahead.
So I'll answer that one. So the qualifying costs in small businesses, the way it's defined in the tax code is a business with less than 500 people and roughly less than 100 million turnover. The qualifying costs in those businesses, yes, the majority of claims are made up of payroll costs. So that is someone's fully loaded cost of employment in terms of salary, national insurance, pension if there is one, and bonus if there is one paid. You can't, unfortunately, claim back car allowances and things like that. So the answer is definitely payroll. In construction, sub-consultants, consultants who may have contributed to it, even if you've got some specialist subcontractors who's made a contribution to the development of some innovative method statement, those sorts of things, they can all count. If you have made test pieces which haven't been included in the final building or piece of infrastructure, we've had test pieces made and tested, the cost of the actual material cost and the manufacturing cost of those can be claimed usually. So there's a wide range of cost elements which count, and in a way you're right. What we look at in the way that we look at R&D in this sector is that we look at all of the projects that a business has been involved with. You can go back 2 years, by the way. This is all historic. So the UK system's historic. You look at costs over the past 2 years, and we look at all the projects you've been involved with, and we, together with the management of that business, we make a very detailed assessment of the R&D activity, and then obviously the costs associated with that. Hope that helps the answer. I've got another. I can go back to the question before last, which was the one on technology or selling technology into this industry. It is difficult. What I would say, and it's quite a crowded marketplace, there's lots of people selling technology into construction. The key thing is you need to be able to demonstrate quite clearly what the benefits are. And because the business is a low margin business, reducing cost or reducing risk are real hot buttons for construction. So again, to echo what Brendan said, I might be teaching grandma to suck eggs, but sometimes you have to state the obvious. I think the other thing is rate of adoption of a particular technology. If it really has got an edge, the early adopters are the ones who get the advantage, because if it is the greatest thing since sliced bread, take Teams for example. I'm not saying it's better than Zoom, but there's two key market leaders in this kind of video conferencing marketplace. Yeah, they've proven their worth in the last 8 weeks, because we're talking about us, but we also know with our clients we've managed to continue working in some ways more efficiently than before, and the virus has catalyzed our adoption of this technology, and I'm a slow adopter of technology, but I can tell you within 10 minutes of being locked up at home, I've worked out how to use Teams. I had no choice. It's getting, if you can articulate the sales part of your technology, thinking about those sorts of things, you're on the path to success, assuming your technology is any good.
Okay, thank you for that. Actually, we've got a question in here as well too that is in regards to what you were just talking about retrospective R&D claims. So 2 quick fire off ones. Can the tax credit be retrospectively applied to previously filed accounts? That's from Derek from System Wide Interface. And Damien from Crofton Interiors says, should we be logging all of the hours for the persons who are doing the research during the year? And will this be required as part of the backup for any claim? If we can answer that one quickly.
Who do you want to answer that? Me?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, it just.
Yeah. Okay. So yes, it's a retrospective. You apply retrospectively. So if it's the first time that you're claiming, typically we do 2 years together. So we'll write one report that covers the 2 previous financial years. So let's take an example where let's say your year end is August this year. You can still claim for your year ending August 18, but it must be lodged before the end of August. So if we took on a new client with whose year end is in August, we would look at the 2 years together. That's the year ending 18 and 19. Write one report and then quantify it. And then our client, all they then need to do is either they themselves or their accountant update your corporate tax form, the CT600, which is a sort of 10-minute job. You can do that as many times as you want until 2 years after your financial year end. So if you've already, obviously for 18, you should have already have submitted your accounts, and 19 probably. So you've already lodged those accounts. You've probably already paid the tax in 18. You may well be expecting a heavy bill for 19. The benefit of this is you can update those CT600s, send our report into your tax office, and they will, once they processed it, and they're doing that remarkably quickly at the moment, repay tax that you've overpaid for previous years. And if there's anything left over, they'll give you a credit on the following year. So that, yeah, you get the benefit of your qualifying costs either as cash returned or a future credit. It's up to you how you take it. So I think the key thing here is retrospective. If you've already lodged your accounts, it doesn't matter. You're perfectly entitled to adjust them or update them once we've completed our work. But the key thing is, in the case of a business with their year end in August, if you come to us on the 1st of September, you will have lost 18. We can still do 19 and 20, but 18 will be gone forever. You cannot update after it's 2 years old.
We're going to keep that in mind. Thank you for that, Tim. We've got two questions here for Brendan. Brendan, first one is, they're both anonymous. We are a firm of consulting engineers whose existing revenue streams have been severely impacted by the pandemic. How can we review our business to establish which other markets to target that give us the margin we need to sustain our business? So we'll go through that one first.
Okay, it's an interesting question, because I think the harsh response to that initially is the market doesn't care what you need. The market cares what it needs. So if you have to sustain a margin, you have to earn and deserve that margin. And therefore, particularly now, it's a good opportunity for organisations to review their strategic intent. We speak with a lot of organisations that complain about the way the market that they are in treats them. They complain about the margins they get. Well, that's unfortunately tough. What we always say to organisations, you've got to look very hard at what it is that you have got from a resource point of view, in the broadest sense, and or what can you get hold of. So usually you can get hold of something if you have access to finance. So that's what you have got. And then it's how can you put that to use that's got a competitive advantage? Because if you can do that better, quicker, safer than your competition is, then you've earned and you deserve the right to get the margin you require. If you're just doing either business as usual or doing what everyone else is doing, then you are just down in the swamp and you will get what you're given. So it's very, very important that people really look hard at what their strategy is and how they're always seeking that competitive advantage. Too many businesses, particularly now, you can see that we're starting to think about coming out of lockdown. You can see already people are keen to just get busy again, in the belief that if they work really hard, put in the hours, they will get the return. All the experience tells us it's quite the opposite. It's about those businesses that are being smart, that are looking at the opportunities, that will actually get the margins they deserve.
Wonderful. And a follow-up question about COVID, actually, from Paul from Mott MacDonald. He's asking, I work for Mott MacDonald, but I'm also the chair of the Board of Management of Construction of Excellence in Wales. All parts of the construction sector will need to innovate significantly to recalibrate themselves and the sector overall in response to COVID implications and other matters, for example, climate change, rather than just seek to return to past norms. Is this innovation or is this just business improvement?
Well, let me, Tim, you might want to come in on the specifics of that, but I think that's, I hope that was a loaded question, because I think that almost highlights the issue that I was referring to earlier. in a way, how you define it in that sense doesn't matter. To my mind, what matters is whether you are genuinely trying to distinguish a different and a better way. Because if you do that, you distinguish yourself from the competition. So you can call it business improvement, you can call it innovation. Tim can pick up on how that will support an R&D tax credit claim, if you like. But from a strategic point of view, I don't mind what you call it. What you've got to think of, though, is are you going to do something that the market needs and it will give you competitive advantage? Tim, do you want to try and pick up on the more specific elements of that answer?
Yes, I mean, there's the innovation and research and development. There's a crossover. So there's some innovation includes research and development, and of course, research and development can be innovative or should be. So that's the simple answer. The answer is yes. If you're trying to move the industry forward, if you're trying to either cope with the current COVID crisis or work out ways of having a less severe effect on the industry with potential future pandemics, that is likely to contain some research and development activity which you can claim back. Same with climate change, same with many other things. I mean, we have seen from our clients and others, both here and in the States, very, very rapid innovation of COVID-19 pandemic products, which most of them have been modifications to existing ones. So the one I'm thinking about is Reactech, who make the HAVS devices, the wearable technology for protecting people from hand-arm vibration. And of course, the great thing with their technology is everything goes up in the cloud. You've got continuous monitoring. Of course, what they've done is they've now added in a new patch, which allows, if you've got two people wearing the same technology, gives you a continuous reading about whether they get within 2 meters of each other or not. They've done that very rapidly, and of course that activity of developing that very, very useful and timely product, not everything they do, but some of that, it's mostly software development, they'll be able to claim back, and I'm sure they are. So the answer is clearly yes. So this is all to do with the mindset, because our own Ben Pritchard, who was formerly the G4C chairman, is a very passionate person about the systemic improvement of the industry, and so he should be. Young people should be optimistic and wanting to sort of change the world. The key thing is it can't be done. It can't be done really top down. It has to be on a business by business basis, my own view, with guidance from government and industry bodies. And the great thing is that the mechanism exists to fund that research and development through the tax code, because there's what you might call the head office budgeted development projects. The ones where the FD will actually understand, we've got £50,000 set aside for doing that project, and therefore that's often what you find where people have done their own R&D claim. They know if they've got a research project that's been funded centrally, because what we know is it's actually happening day to day on live projects. So there's actually a war chest being built up over the past 2 years that businesses can claim back from the government and then reinvest that in very specific business improvement or industry improvement initiatives of their own devising, rather than problems that have been set by their clients.
Great.
Hope that helps.
That one. We've got another comment here about our Industry 4.0 report. He says, I read your Industry 4.0 report with great interest. In it, you mentioned that companies need to be more focused in choosing a target market. How do we go about selecting a target market to focus on, and how can we identify our operational strengths and weaknesses? Who'd like to field that one?
Well, I'll pick that up. I think I sort of touched on that with one of my earlier responses. It's about identifying what you have and why you deserve to get a return. But maybe picking up the second part of that about how you can go about that. Tim mentioned that we have what we call the business health check. It's got it looks at the European Foundation of Quality model of excellence, and what that's looking at is the inputs and the outputs of what contributes or what constitutes an excellent business. So we work with organizations to really look through particularly the enablers, things like strategy, leadership, the people, the resources, the processes they have there, to understand where their relative strengths and weaknesses are. If the position is appropriate for the market they're in and they're getting the return that their shareholders require, then do more of it. Invariably, it identifies some areas where it's producing results that are suboptimal, and therefore we can identify particular areas of improvement that organizations can focus on, get the results back, see that they're moving in the right trajectory, and do more of that. If it's not giving the desired results, let's look at something else, so that we're constantly looking at the enablers and the results and making sure that they're working together to keep on creating this more holistic improvement cycle.
Right. Just on that note, another viewer has asked that they've recently switched to a different business model and they're struggling to build consensus in the business for a new approach. How can they persuade everyone inside their business to come on that journey with them?
Yeah, I think this is a good point, because I think it's an interesting term, pivoted. It might be imposed. People don't like have new business models imposed upon them. They want to feel as though they have been party to it. So it'd be interesting to know to what extent people within that organisation were engaged with it. Of course, there are sometimes that business models need to be imposed through periods of crisis and the like. But we should never forget that businesses are made up of people, and people will always ask, well, what's in it for me? And if people don't understand what's in it for them, we shouldn't be surprised if they don't embrace it. If you do take the time, even if it has to be done retrospectively because it's being forced upon you, it is the time and investment well worth making to really explain why you're doing what you're doing, explain why there is a benefit to individuals, and also make sure that you don't become too intransigent, that if through those discussions it is seen that there is the opportunity to improve it so it's better for everyone, then don't be too proud to make that change as well.
Wonderful advice. We've got time for two more quick questions here just to get everybody's questions answered. So Derek Tierney from CRL System-Wide Interface is asking, what range of size of businesses are you best placed to support? Between 1 million, 10 million, and 100 million turnover.
So I'll answer that one if you like.
Yep. Go ahead, Tim.
So yeah, hi Derek. Our clients, I've got a one-man developer who we've done strategic work for in the past 12 months, right up to international businesses with thousands of employees. And I think that's important, that I wouldn't say we're agnostic about size. We are excited to work with businesses at all stages of their development journey. And I think that's, well, I'll speak personally now, I'm sure it's true for Brendan. Yeah, that's what we like about our work, that we are dealing with people up and down the supply chain. We're dealing with businesses of all scales. Big corporates, owner-managed businesses are very common with us, not just here, but Ireland and in Canada. It's obviously a lot more intimate with smaller businesses. It's bound to be, isn't it? But nevertheless, there is no scale that we go for, if you like, in terms of the strategic stuff that we do. It's really about whether we think we can help people and what the nature of that help might be, and really I think that's it. So all scales is the answer. All scales we're interested in.
That makes complete sense. Just two more quick questions and then we're going to wrap it up. Thank you everybody who's hopped on. And if you do have any questions that didn't get answered, please feel free to pop over to our website, send Tim or Brendan an email. Their emails are right on the top of the page there. So a quick question for Brendan. We did go over this a little bit, but we are a civil engineering contractor who subcontract the majority of our work. Are they eligible to get R&D tax credits, and how do they facilitate that into their business? And just to add on to that question, another viewer has asked, how do you ensure that you make the efficient use of your client's time when you provide R&D tax services?
Robert, I think if I start again, from a civil engineering contractor point of view, I think the first thing is, are you engaging in an activity which is seeking to resolve a scientific or technological uncertainty? That's the first test. If you are doing that, then your direct cost, where appropriate, is attributable. Then where you're subcontracting the activity, then a proportion, 65% of that cost then becomes potentially allowable. So it does grade down depending on the extent of it. But obviously, I think Tim alluded to this earlier, from an HMRC point of view, they want to ensure that you are controlling the activity. That this is something that is your initiative and you are deploying resource to actually come up with a solution to that uncertainty. With regard to our support service, I think we recognise that businesses more than ever are extremely busy just keeping their businesses going. So what we always say is, what we want to do is just be given access to the information. A lot of information resides within organisations anyway. If you make that available to us, we can interrogate it. If you can make key people available to us, we will be respectful of people's time. We will collate queries or questions so that we can then very effectively raise those questions and not ask them to come up with detailed responses, but just point us in the direction of where we can get the responses.
Okay, so we're wrapping up there. Shelley has just sent in not a question, but a great thank you for the excellent insight. So thank you so much for joining us, Shelley. And we really appreciate everybody who was able to take the time out to join us today. We hope that it was really informative, and we really look forward to having you download our executive briefing about our response to the Community Innovation Survey. We'll be releasing that next Friday, just so you're all aware. I will put the link and send it out to everybody via email on LinkedIn, so that you're able to get access to that. It's on our LinkedIn Invennt page, and you're able to connect and download that, get pre-registration for it, and it'll be released next Friday. We can't wait to hear your insights and feedback on the response, any thoughts that you have. And that's thank you from me, and we look forward to seeing you on the next webinar, everybody.